The serious fuel shortage in Russia is accelerating discontent among citizens. Now the predictions are that if the situation continues like this, social unrest in Russia will be inevitable. This is also confirmed by expert circles. It is also noted that Ukraine's new tactics are also calculated to increase social discontent in Russia. Recall, Ukraine has dramatically increased the number of attacks launched against Russian oil refineries in recent months, sparking fuel shortages and price rises in some parts of the country. Drone strikes on refineries, some deep inside Russia, soared in August and remained high in September, an analysis of Russian media reports and verified footage showed. Some 21 of the country's 38 largest refineries, where crude oil is converted into usable fuel like petrol and diesel, have been hit since January, with successful attacks already 40% higher than the whole of 2024. Between the 20th of March and 30th of June 2025, using open sources and satellite imagery, the OSINT community Cyber Boroshno recorded 19 confirmed hits on defense plants, 5 on military facilities, and none on energy infrastructure. For a long time, Ukraine showed restraint and stuck to what had been agreed, refraining from striking energy infrastructure. However, after relentless Russian attacks on Ukraine's power facilities, in which Ukrainian civilians lost their lives, unilateral restraint no longer made sense, and drone operators began to strike Russian oil refineries and pipelines again. In August and September 2025, Cyber Boroshno was able to confirm 30 attacks on energy facilities on Russian territory. Of these, 23 were successful, 2 unsuccessful, and 5 inconclusive. The strikes on Russia's oil refining infrastructure follow a clear and consistent logic. Importantly, many of the strikes now target essential equipment rather than oil tanks, as in the previous campaign, according to Ukrainskaya Pravda. It also appears that the predominant Ukrainian strike weapon, judging by the videos posted at least, is now the FP-1 drone from Firepoint. The legendary Lyuti UAVs still fly, but they are seen less often. Many hits have proved effective and have disrupted production and logistics, but it's still too early to draw conclusions. To turn these isolated successes into a steady strategic outcome, a systematic approach is required. Consistent verification of every case and, in parallel, improvements in the capacity, accuracy, and sustainability of strikes. Equally important, actions must be coordinated with diplomatic and economic steps in order to maximize pressure on the Russians. What can be said at this moment in time? Fuel shortages on the consumer market have become a problem across Russia. Cyber Boroshno analyzed Russian open sources and documented reports of fuel supply problems in 33 of Russia's 83 constituent entities. We have marked them on a map, Ukrainska Pravda says. As Ekonomichna Pravda has explained, Ukraine's strikes on refineries are occurring during the season of peak fuel consumption. Clearly, the defense forces chose just the right time to conduct the campaign. But it would be naive to think that the fuel situation will have any effect on the availability of diesel for Russian troops. Russian tanks will obviously be prioritized for refueling, and the shortages will most affect civilians and exporters. Now that the latest campaign is underway, different media outlets are offering different figures and conflicting opinions. For example, the Russian outlet RBC said 38% of refinery capacity has been put out of service, and 2/3 of that was due to Ukrainian strikes. Kommersant, another Russian media outlet, reported a 20% fuel deficit and a 1 million-ton drop in production in September. All this is also increasing social discontent in Russia. It seems inevitable that this discontent will turn into riots. In eastern Ukraine, the situation has changed dramatically in recent months as the Russians have moved much closer and are destroying civilian infrastructure, The Economist writes. The publication notes that according to Ukrainian Mayor Vyacheslav Shutenko, the city of Konstantinovka is not under any real threat of falling in the near future. At the same time, the gradual advance of Russian occupiers means that neighboring Druzhkovka is also coming under increased shelling. A 20-hour curfew has been in effect in the town since October the 6th. Also, part of the main road to Izium has become vulnerable to drone attacks, so traffic has been diverted to bypass roads. However, according to the publication, despite these successes, the Russian army is facing inevitable defeat. In August, their constant reconnaissance attacks revealed a weak spot in Ukraine's defenses near Dobropilya, 20 kilometers north of Pokrovsk. The Russian occupiers managed to break through the Ukrainian armed forces' defenses, advancing more than 13 kilometers in just a few days. This was faster than their logistical, unmanned and other units could keep up. As the publication points out, if the new salient had been secured, they could have turned around and encircled Pokrovsk. However, the Ukrainian military managed to halt the Russian advance, and now the occupiers are surrounded. Cases of mass surrenders are also recorded on the eastern Ukrainian front. According to Lieutenant Colonel Arsen Lemko-Dimitrik of the Azov Brigade of the Ukrainian National Guard, the Russians have lost approximately 10,000 soldiers in this battle since August. However, the article states that this figure cannot be verified. The Ukrainian military officer also declined to disclose Ukraine's losses, only noting that they were significantly lower than Russia's. The military man added that this battle was an example of good coordination involving dozens of units. In the past, poor coordination had been blamed for the country's losses. The article also notes that, according to Lemka, the Russians have lost 50 tanks and armored vehicles in the past week. He added that the number of Russian occupiers in the area has dwindled from hundreds a month ago to less than 100 today. Since the Russians are surrounded, the Ukrainian defender predicts they won't hold out for long. The publication notes that while the bloody battle continues along the entire front line on the military front, certain shifts have occurred on the diplomatic front. Specifically on October the 16th, US President Donald Trump and Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin spoke by phone and agreed to meet in Budapest within a few weeks. Trump called the call productive, but provided no details to indicate that the upcoming talks would yield more results than the previous meeting.